Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our Friday panel on the Olympic bid that never came to be. But first, a call for action.
Social media acts as like an evil mirror. It highlights our insecurities while setting the bar for what we must attain to an impossible level.
Perspective on the dangers youth are being exposed to online, and with it, warnings that children are being targeted by social media algorithms, AI chatbots, and other online technology. And joining us now, Sarah Austin, founder of and CEO of Calgary-based Children First Canada. Sarah, good to see you. Welcome back to Alberta Primetime.
Great to see you. Thanks so much for having me back.
All right. You're fresh off of testifying this week before the House of Commons Heritage Committee. What was your message to federal lawmakers?
My message was loud and clear. The time for studies is over. They need to stop stalling and start acting. For years, we've known what the right thing is to do. It's been 1,600 days since the federal government pledged to introduce online safety legislation to protect children and all Canadians from online harms. As every day goes by, children's lives are on the line. Kids pay significantly with their mental and physical health, their well-being. And so really, in my point and the testimony of Josephine, who you heard at the top of this interview, and Zachary, 12-year-old Zachary, who was with me, was really to try and plead with our parliamentarians to do the right thing, to table the Online Safety Act, and to work with parents, their children, and MPs from all political stripes to get this legislation passed as quickly as possible.
Okay, let's pick up on some of that, because this call to fast-track legislation, far from a fast process. Just a couple months ago, you were driving force behind a big push to reintroduce the Online Safety Act by December 31st. That did not come to pass. Give us some perspective on how long a road this has been.
Children First Canada has been in place for 10 years now, and throughout this past decade, we have been really speaking up on behalf of Canada's 8 million children and demanding that our federal leaders take action to protect kids in this digital world. And our advocacy has really been driven by what the kids themselves have told us. Children and youth from coast to coast to coast have been speaking up about what it's like to be a kid in this digital world. It's very different than it was for you and me. We didn't grow up with social media, the internet, and all the benefits and harms that it brings with it. And kids are, as we heard from Josephine, really frustrated with the harm that they're exposed to every day. They see the benefits. They're not naive. They don't want to have all technology taken out of their lives. They realize it's an important part of their education, their connection to their peers. They get to learn and connect with others. But they really see that there's a moral authority for parents, for educators, and particularly for our policymakers to step into the gap and to create regulation that creates a safer digital space for them to live in. In all other aspects of kids' lives, whether it's the food they eat, the medicine they take, the cars that they ride in, the parks that they play in, all of these spaces are regulated. We demand safety for children, and it's not to say that these laws are perfect, but they create a safer environment for our kids. And yet in the digital world, we've gone for over 20 years now, trusting the tech industry to do the right thing, and they have been proving themselves untrustworthy. Earlier this week in the United States, there were bereaved parents who have lost their children, tragically had to bury their kids because of online harms, who stood in front of the Capitol with photos of their children pleading with their lawmakers and where they're pursuing legal action. One of those photos was of Amanda Todd from British Columbia. She tragically died due to suicide at the age of 15. Her mother, Carol, was testifying with me to Parliament earlier this week. The time for studies is over. We need our leaders to take action, and we are begging and pleading with them to do that.
How far do you see the federal government willing to go with the legislation that finally comes to be?
There's a lot of talk right now about what's happening in Australia with the social media age restrictions and limiting kids under 16 from accessing social media apps. That's created a huge global uproar. Parents excited to see steps being taken. We've seen France and Spain and other countries talking about similar action, and it's raising questions for a lot of parents here in Canada. Thousands of parents here in Canada have signed a petition calling on our government to follow suit. We actually want our government to take a further step, to actually raise raise the bar, because we know that kids are harmed with social media, but it goes way beyond that. We've seen countless examples of kids being harmed by AI chatbots, by the creation of AI sexual abuse content material involving children. The family vehicles even that we sit, our kids ride in have apps that can create harmful content. And so kids are digital citizens. They're exposed from technology from the moment they wake up to the moment that they go to sleep, in their homes, in their schools, on their phones and tablets. And we need legislation that looks at this full range of technology and that holds tech companies to account, and that really does better to equip parents and children who are just feeling at our wits' end, quite frankly, with better tools to keep our kids safe in this digital world.
Okay, in terms of setting that bar, any concern over legislation being unable to keep up with just how rapidly the online world is evolving?
It is an impossible task to have a piece of legislation that is going to be the silver bullet here. We recognize that no law is going to be perfect. It's going to have to evolve over time as the technology continues to evolve. We've seen just in the past few months alone the escalation of harms, particularly around AI harms, whether it's on Grok and X or AI. Just recently there was a boy here arrested in Calgary, 17-year-old boy arrested for creating abusive content using AI involving multiple girls across schools here in the city. We've just seen so many other harms that are being perpetrated against kids, and so we need legislation that looks at this full scope and that continues to be evaluated and evolved. But we can't wait for the perfect solution. We've seen government now stalling for 4 years. 4 years. They promised to do this in 100 days, and yet 4 years have passed. That's a third of a child's childhood. Every day that passes puts kids in harm's way, and so we need them to act with what they know today and continue to evolve and change as technology evolves around it.
You obviously continue to put pressure on the federal government, but maybe as we close the conversation, what kind of message do you send to parents, especially those whose kids spend a fair amount of time online, but as parents, we may not be tracking that activity?
I'm a mom, and I realize it feels sometimes like an impossible task. It feels totally overwhelming to stay on top of these things. But I think first and foremost, we as parents owe it to our kids to be educated and informed. There are lots of great resources that exist from, and I think we need to be equipped in making sure that our kids' devices are set up with whatever controls we can, and that we're limiting their access to apps that we know are harmful and can really damage our children. But to not feel powerless in this situation. We have voices. We can hold our leaders to account. We encourage people to go to countdownforkids.ca to sign a petition to demand that our members of parliament and our prime minister pass this legislation as quickly as possible. The time for partisan bickering over this is over. This isn't about controlling free speech. This isn't about creating unnecessary bureaucracy. This is about the essential task of protecting our children. And so we need all political leaders to work together to solve this. And so we need parents to raise their voices, to hold our leaders to account, and to demand better for all of our children.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. Appreciate your time this evening, and good to see you, Sarah. Thank you.
Great to see you too. Thank you so much.
Sarah Austin is founder and CEO of Calgary-based Children First Canada. From reflecting on an Olympic bid that never came to pass, to the push for long-promised online protections, contending with overcrowding at Lake Louise, and making the most of imperfect produce. Our Primetime This Week panel is in, and joining us this evening, social worker and community activist Karen Richards, and Tom Keenan, professor in the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape at the University of Calgary and the author of Techno-Creep. Good evening to you both, and let's begin on the Winter Olympics officially getting underway today in Milano Cortina, Italy. Winter Games that could have been kicking off in Calgary. Despite preparations for a potential bid, a referendum back in 2018 saw Calgarians putting a stop to it.
No, I don't have any regrets. I'm excited to watch the Olympics in Italy, and I'll be cheering on our athletes, but I don't think hosting the Olympics was the right thing for Calgary.
Now, supporters of the bid still maintain investment in infrastructure would have made it worthwhile.
A rail line from the airport to downtown, a rail network between Calgary and Edmonton, a rail system from Calgary to Lake Louise. These could have all been part of an Olympic, Paralympic bid.
The cost of the arena alone is more than 3 times what it would have cost for us to host the Olympic Games. And we would have gotten the arena 1/3 subsidized by the province and 1/3 subsidized by the federal government.
As for business community perspective?
We know that the government's very focused on increasing the tourist dollars that come to the province. This would have been such an important catalyst to really move that forward.
And as for the current mayor, who, as a councillor at the time, was a vocal opponent.
And I think right now, when we see our current infrastructure situation, what's happening with the water main, I think we're breathing a sigh of relief that we're not hosting the Olympics this time around.
The outcome of that 2018 referendum in Calgary, 54% of voters said no, thank you. Karen, how different do you think Alberta would be right now had Calgary made the bid and won the right to hosting the Games?
Yes, I think that Alberta in itself would probably remain mostly the same, but maybe, who knows, they could have found that water main problem in Calgary before it happened, and then there would have been a lot of money invested in trying to fix it up really quickly. Or maybe there could have been that rail line from Edmonton to Calgary, which would have been really good. We don't know exactly what it would look like, but we do know that there definitely would have been infrastructure dollars that were put in place. But what I know also in Alberta is that if it's not hockey, they're not really putting infrastructure dollars to it. So I have a feeling that that's why some of the Olympic madness maybe didn't bite Calgary so much in the butt at that time.
Tom, as the Calgarian on the panel, lost opportunity. How are you reflecting on that decision less than a decade later?
Oh, I really wish we had done it. You know, back in '88, I took a month off from work. I became a reporter. I was embedded to go into the Olympic Village. I traded with the Jamaica bobsled team and things like that. It was a really exciting time, and I was kind of hoping it would happen again. It would have brought, as was mentioned, transit lines and arenas and stuff like that. And other things like that Olympic Oval from 1988 is starting to show its age. I guess we do have to respect the will of the people. I don't get the mayor's point about the water infrastructure, though, because athletes are all going to drink bottled water and spectators are drinking beer, right? So I don't think that would have been a relevant factor.
Karen, how about the here and now? How excited are you for the Winter Games to get underway?
Yeah, I do truly love having the Olympics, but we actually watch it more of a background. What really gets me excited is those athletes that are there that have just one athlete that's from the whole country, and they're there to represent their whole country. There's one who's actually a Canadian now, but is from Venezuela and is participating in a cross-country ski event. So I'm excited to see that. Opening games are today, or the opening ceremony. So I think it's going to be another great 10 days of entertainment.
And Tom, if there's a discipline that I suspect you're probably watching for, it has something to do with the alpine sports?
Absolutely, the snowboarding and some of the ski jumps and things like that. Those are going to be the fun things to watch for me.
All right. Next up, we heard from child safety advocate Sarah Austin off the top of the program this evening on pressing Parliament to fast-track long-promised online protections. Tom, as a nation, how far behind the curve are we on this, especially as growth in the use of AI rapidly accelerates?
We're behind the UK, we're behind Europe. Everybody knows we're behind Australia because they passed that ban on under 16s having social media. It remains to be seen whether that's actually going to work out for them or not. So what's happened is that there have been attempts to do this twice in Canada. Laws have been, going forward, and then they were interrupted by elections. So it's just kind of bad luck. But the other thing, of course, is the pressure of the tech companies. They have very powerful lobby groups. They want essentially no control over what they do. It's starting to get so persuasive, though. We're having suicides. We're having kids being groomed over Roblox and kid sites like that. So I think it's inevitable that we're going to have a law. I guess the upside might be we'll have the benefit of all the other jurisdictions and what they tried that did and did not work when we finally get our Online Harms Act.
Karen, as a parent, how do you view the cost of delayed efforts to regulate digital platforms, protect young minds?
There's definitely a cost, but I think that as a parent, it's also my responsibility to try and reduce that cost as much as I can. So I have strict I call them strict, and my kids, or at least call them strict rules in terms of what my kids are into on the phone and how often they're using it, when they're supposed to or not supposed to, because the responsibility, we can't rely on all of these tech companies to actually do it. We saw them all at the presidential inauguration. They have VIP status, and they are going to continue to utilize things like AI to be using our kids to train those machines so that in the future they eventually even won't have jobs. I think it is our responsibility as parents, as citizens, and as governments to make sure that there's rules in place to try and reduce some of these effects, but it is inevitable. There's not too much that we can do when the tech companies are going to be fighting it tooth and nail.
All right. Well said. Time for us to take a bit of a break. When we come back, contending with the strain of tourism and an Alberta company making the most of a unique business opportunity. More from our Primetime This Week panel in a moment. Welcome back. Lake Louise is a hugely popular destination, so much so it's led to overcrowding concerns. Since 2010, foot traffic has increased 70%, with 2.6 million people visiting annually, putting a strain on facilities from May through October.
As the station continues to increase, new approaches and tools.
And to help guide the way, Parks Canada now seeking public input on managing visitor use for the next 5 to 7 years.
They expect to enjoy nature. People are not coming here expecting to get the Costco parking lot vibe. And that's something we have to be very careful to listen to.
Already under consideration, a parking reservation system, parking time limits, even a ban on personal vehicles along Lake Louise Drive. Some working in the village also suggest ditching the federal government's Canada Strong free entry pass, which is set to return this summer.
Our park is overwhelmed already, and the park needs to be funded.
And Lake Louise, not alone in feeling the pressure, as we've seen in recent weeks, including this Skijoring event. It pushed Banff well beyond capacity. Vehicles parked outside of town, lined up, as we can see there. Karen, how heavy a hand do you feel Parks Canada needs to employ here to rein in these visitor pressures?
So I don't live in Lake Louise. Maybe those who do won't like what I'm about to say, but I really hope that they don't take away that Canada Strong and free pass or use a heavy hand to make it so that people are not accessing these parks. More of the problem is the vehicles specifically, as opposed to more people actually being there. So I think that anything that they can do to increase funding, one for trail systems, of course, but also to figure out how can we get better shuttles, maybe from Calgary, all the way from Calgary, not just Banff, to Lake Louise. How can we ensure, I thought parking was a way to really reduce it, but parking in Lake Louise is really expensive also. It costs almost $38 a day. So something like a reservation system for parking is something that maybe could work, but let's not go too hard to make it inaccessible for others who may not have been able to enjoy the park in the past.
Tom, how do you weigh the impact of the Canada Strong Pass on national parks and the decision to bring that free entry back for another holiday season?
It's going to increase the traffic even more, but I am so sentimental about Lake Louise because the first time I saw it, I was leading a bike trip. It's when I came to Alberta, and we biked up that road, all the way up that hill, for the sole purpose of going in the swimming pool so we could get a shower because we were so sweaty. So, there's that pull of it, but people go there and they don't want to be stumbling over other people lining up to take selfies and stuff. What I can tell you is that if you go a little off the beaten track, like we used to take a group up by the Valley of the 10 Peaks, totally crowded the first half hour, nobody after you get nearer the top. So, the reality is people could spread out a little better. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask people to take a bus in there. They do that in the U.S. in Bryce and Zion Parks and Grand Canyon. And there's so many other great places, like there's K Country. And, to that point about the Canada Strong Pass, what I really wish they would do is get rid of the dopey K Country Pass. It's such an annoyance to stop and buy that thing. And there are great scenes in there, so maybe we can spread some more tourists down Kananaskis Country Way.
All right, for us, one more topic, and it's a new online food delivery company taking root in Edmonton and Calgary. And it's unique in that it's selling imperfect produce from farmers and growers, food often turned away from the grocery store.
So this could be an undersized apple, it could be a misshapen pepper, perfectly good to eat, but maybe just doesn't look perfect.
Part of the company's mission is to reduce food waste. According to Second Harvest Canada, more than 46% of food is thrown out, and 42% of that is avoidable.
Companies will default to the easy route, which is sending it to landfill, right? And that's the worst outcome for food that really deserves to be eaten.
While the produce from Odd Bunch may not be good enough for store shelves, it is good for you.
The nutrition for fruits and vegetables, they depend more on things like the soil quality, like weather and other growing conditions. The
selection of produce from Odd Bunch changes with every delivery. Tom, what do you make of this as a business venture and the impact it could have on the marketplace?
It's a great venture. I happened to be at a retreat house recently, and I said, where do you get your vegetables? They said, we get them from the Odd Bunch because they're a good deal. This is actually not a new idea. For years, the city of Calgary social workers have run something called a good food box. Same type of idea. They're not necessarily misshapen or anything, but it's you pay $20, $30, $40, whatever size you want, and you have to go pick up the box, okay? I now use a service that delivers the box, and I'll say the name, Pico Produce, and what they do is they throw other things in as well, because they are the people who make the meal kits, the fresh prep meal kits, so sometimes there's like a whole meal kit in there. So, yes, I love this idea. It doesn't matter who you get it from, as long as you make good use of that food, you're helping the environment and helping yourself.
Karen, how does imperfect produce land with you, especially at a time when we're all contending with this issue of affordability?
Yeah, we definitely are. And I love this box. I love this idea. You know, it leads to more cooking, more meal planning, more people eating food that is more likely to actually be in season, which is actually good for sustainability also. I think it also really helps to reduce consumerism a bit, where we are all made to think that for things to be good, they have to be perfect. And I think that that is not the truth. And so I love the concept of this really posing that. Visitors that I've had come from out of the country come to the grocery store and think, wow, every single apple looks exactly the same, but that's not how it grows in nature. And so I think that that's what we also need to recognize. Get closer to your food and see what it really looks like and is made out of.
All right, you two, 20 seconds each, a winner or a loser. Karen, you're up.
I'm going winner. This is my favorite time of year, favorite month. It's the month of family, of love. There's Valentine's Day. And of course, it's Black History Month. I just want to give a quick shout out and an RIP to Dr. Deacon John Hagan. That's a loss for our province, but we're all winners in general.
All right. Tom, take it home.
American political scientist, his name is Norm Ornstein. His son tragically died in an accident at the age of 34. And, you know, he was a rich kid. He went to all the best schools. What Norm is doing now is he's endowing his son's favorite thing, which is debating among underprivileged kids in Washington, D.C. Absolutely a great idea, because debating makes you take both sides. You don't know if you're affirmative or negative. So it's a foundation now, the Matthew Harris Ornstein, Norm Ornstein Foundation.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Great to see you both. Hope you have an awesome weekend.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News about Prime Minister Carney and Conservative leader Poilievre pushing for collaboration after a one-on-one meeting on Parliament Hill Wednesday. Therese says, I'm happy they met, and I hope they help each other for our country's sake. Evgeny writes, I'm Conservative, but Pierre needs to stop criticizing and start helping Carney keep Canada united while we deal with Trump. Money thinks Carney focuses on photo optics as usual, nothing substantive. Stephen says, I hope the two leaders can talk, identify what parts of bills they agree on and approve them ASAP. Anything that needs to be negotiated should be put aside. Canada needs to move fast. And DR writes, I personally don't mind aggressive and divisive politics. If everyone is a yes person, what's the point of our democracy? Have your say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. That is our program for this evening. Have a great evening and a great weekend, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.